Hello, everybody. This is Martha Hines with Living the One Light. So, in this video, I am feeling called to kind of switch gears a little bit for a moment to speak to a really important point that somebody brought up. Somebody emailed me this morning and helped me to realize that I want to address something really, really key in this whole time in our world, and something that's really relevant, I think, for probably all of us, most of us at least, who are navigating these times from a more spiritual-ish perspective. But maybe this applies to just about anybody who cares about the world, which is most people. So what this person said in this email that got me thinking was, I sent out an email today to my email list, talking about my experience of the eclipse yesterday and talking about how powerful it was for me, which it was, and how the beauty of it and my own experience of feeling really moved by the moon and the sun meeting and being like essentially like a divine union, right? So she said that's really beautiful, but why didn't you address the Israel-Gaza situation? Why didn't you address the tragedies of our world? Why didn't you send up a prayer for that? So I wrote her back, and then she wrote me back, and it was really beautiful exchange, actually. And I mean, part of me was taken aback because I have addressed these things. I do pray about it. I am very affected by it. I have said that in a lot of my videos, et cetera, et cetera. And another part of me recognized that, of course, when we're talking about, this light and love stuff, it can really easily seem like and become like we talk about a spiritual bypassing, and also it can easily seem like a cop-out, to like ignorance or ignoring of the reality of the tragedies of our world. So that all of the above, I feel like, is true, and I want to speak to it a little bit, give my own feelings, my own thoughts in this moment, not as the truth, just as my own exploration of it, because I've done a lot of thinking about these things for my entire life, actually, given the way that I grew up and given the work I did, etc. And so I'm sharing this, really, truly, just from a place of being a human navigating this moment, just like you are, just like all of us are, and my own thoughts, where I happen to sit with it in this minute, and it could change 5 minutes from now. So to start on a basic level, I'll share a few things about myself that I think some of you know and some of you maybe don't know. But so I was born in Thailand, and I lived in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Kenya, and the United States when I was growing up. And I was raised largely by my biological parents, but then also my stepmother, who was from Pakistan. She was very poor background and had a really tragic life, and she died in 2001. So I still have a lot of family in Pakistan, and actually also in India. A lot of my family lives in India, and I've traveled to a lot of the world, and have a lot of connections, actually, also to all of you, and a lot of you are all over the world too. So there's that. And then when I grew up, I became a social worker. So I went straight out of college into getting my master's degree in clinical social work, which I graduated from in 2001. And the program I went to at Smith College School for Social Work specializes in trauma work, trauma and attachment, and actually, well, anti-racism and human rights too. But trauma was the big thing I got trained in. And then all of the work I did in social work over the next couple of decades was almost entirely with children and families in the child protective services system. So I was a therapist. I did assessments, mental health assessments in that world. I, did a lot of testifying on the stand in cases in the juvenile justice system, child abuse cases, pretty horrific situations, a lot of them. And anyway, I was a social worker I did a lot of work in that whole field. So both in my growing up and in my professional life, in that big chunk of time, I've seen, witnessed, heard about, unspeakable traumas of our planet. Many, 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 many of them. And when I was a child, I was living in Peshawar, Pakistan during the Afghan War. So I was there in the mid 80s. And so there was, the presence of the Afghan War and the Afghan refugees, and in particular the Afghan women, really impacted me big time. And then the life of my own stepmother, who was Pakistani, but also had, dealt with very extreme trauma her whole life as a woman in Pakistan. So I say all of that just to say I've seen a lot in my life, and not everything, but I've seen a lot, and I care a lot. I care incredibly deeply about it. So when I then got told by the spirit world in 2018 that I was going to need to leave social work and do this work that I'm doing now, I was taken aback for a lot of reasons, including the fact that I am very passionate about social justice, the social justice, human rights needs of our world. I mean, really, truly, I'm a social worker at heart. I don't think that'll ever leave me. That's really who I am. So, so I've had a number of experiences in my life, in what I would call almost like a certain version of survivor guilt. So I had an experience, for example, when I was 19, I was in college, and I went and spent a month in my stepmother's village in Pakistan. And again, her family's very poor. And so I was staying in their house, and they have no running water and dirt floor, and one room, and the whole family is in one room, and that whole thing. So long story short, anyway, I saw a lot of pretty tragic things there, especially with the way the women are treated, and girls being married to much, much, much older men who they don't know and don't want to marry. And, like these girls who I became friends with saying my life is over, and just being devastated, right? So I came back to the United States pretty devastated, and I had this kind of, I wouldn't call it a crisis exactly. It was more like my emotional system went numb for about 2 months. And I had this question of, what the heck? How can I be happy when that is going on? For most people in the world are living in these tragic situations, including in the United States, where I was living and where I currently live. the amount of tragedy and trauma on this planet is unreal. So I had this feeling of, when that's going on, how can I be happy? How can I choose to be happy? Like, how is that okay? And the conclusion I came to back then, when I was 19, about at that point I was turning 20. This was 26 years ago. Finally I came to the realization that, oh, okay, if I don't choose to be happy, who can be happy on this planet, right? Like, if I have the ability to be happy, and if I choose to not take that opportunity, how is that serving these girls and these women who I deeply love, and boys and men, right? All these people. And actually I would even extend that to the planet itself, and all the environmental tragedies happening, and the animals, and the on and on, right? There's so much being harmed all the time and hurt all the time. So I came to this place finally in myself of getting it, that, okay, part of my role, given that I have these extreme privileges and the ability to, I'm not in a tragic situation in that moment, so I can be happy, and happiness can only be present if it's present, right? Or like joy can only be present if it's present. So I can only be a conduit of happiness or joy if I embody it in some way. And I'm not advocating going around and pretending to be happy so you can spread happiness. That's not what I'm saying. I would say be real with whatever it is you're feeling. But I hope you get the point I'm trying to make. So then, I write about this actually in I've written a draft of a book called Consciousness in Bloom, where I describe a lot of my thoughts about the chronic trauma of our world, and the role that I feel the spirit world calling us into, in terms of our role in healing our world, right? So and that draft is actually available on my Teachable site. It's $4.99, not expensive, and you're very welcome to read it if you like. I'll be publishing it after I sit with it a little longer, but that version is available if you want to read it. And so what I talk about in that book is that one thing we know about trauma, and I know this, from all the trauma work that I did and all the training I had, and many of us know this, is that when we are in an acute trauma state, or a chronic trauma, any kind of trauma state, we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, typically, right? And in any of those states of being, our body goes into survival mode. And so one of the things that happens is that a lot of our brain shuts down, so that our instinctive survival brain can be more alive. And the same is true for our body. It goes into, it does what it needs to do to be in survival mode. So part of what shuts down is our frontal lobe, and the parts of our brain that are really about big picture thinking, planning ahead, thinking about the future, coming up with new innovative ideas. Like, for example, if you're trying to run from a bear, you're probably not in a frame of mind to come up with solutions for world peace, right? That's probably the case. I wouldn't say never, but I would say pretty much never. So similarly, if we are in a chronically traumatized state of being, which we have every reason to be on this planet, it's going to be really hard. We're going to be kind of dampened in our ability to come up with the new solutions that our world is needing. So a big part of what the spirit world says to me, and a big part of kind of the backdrop that I don't always explicitly say, but is there, very present in what everything I do, is that my role is partially or largely to be holding space for us, for myself, for any and all of you who, you know, are part of this community, in various ways, to be holding space so that our nervous systems can relax, can come out of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight reaction mode, can relax and come back into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that relaxed state of being that allows us then to have our whole brain come back online, allows us to digest easily, allows us to sleep well, you know, promotes healing in our body, physical, actual healing in our body. When we're in that fight or flight mode, and we're in that sympathetic nervous system state, we're creating a lot of cortisol, you know, like you probably know all these things, but just to say, like, so then our body is creating all these chemicals that actually, they're great for running from a bear, but they're destructive over time if we're in that state over time. So it actually has a negative effect, very likely, on physical health, on emotional well-being, certainly all of the above. Okay, right. So so what I talk about in Consciousness in Bloom, and I feel like is maybe, you know, important or relevant in this time, in this moment also, is even when there are absolute horrific tragedies happening all over the planet, which there are always, I mean, certainly it's maybe especially in our face right now with the Gaza-Israel situation and the Ukraine-Russia situation. But we know that there are absolutely horrific, tragic situations happening in every moment, in every part of the world, even in the most, you know, wealthy neighborhoods of Montecito, California, here where I live. I mean, I live, you know, not far from Montecito. I can tell you from having worked in the child welfare system, tragic situations that happen in Montecito, California. Absolutely one of the wealthiest parts of the world. So, you know, it's everywhere. Yes, tragedy is everywhere all the time. Even when we know that and we see that and we feel it, and we feel so much compassion and we feel so much empathy, because if you're listening to this, you're probably an exceedingly empathic and sensitive person, I'm gonna guess. I definitely am. Pisces sun in my 7th house, moon on my ascendant. I mean, I'm very, 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 I feel things very strongly. And so even then, there is almost no advantage to being in that fight or flight trauma state, right? So if we just step back and think about it, and this is not logical, and yet if we just step back and think about it logically, if we're gonna think about, okay, how can we be of the most service in the world? If that's our goal, which I think for most of us it is, that is our goal. That's why I'm here. Virgo moon on my Virgo ascendant. I'm here to be of service, period. And to be a mom. And they both have to do with my moon on my ascendant. So anyway, if our goal is to be of service, how can we be of the most service? Well, again, if I step back and I think about it logically, and actually, you know, what I'm told in my prayers is, one of the hugest things we can possibly do, if it's at all possible, unless we are actually running from a bear, or we are in the middle of, a war zone, or something really awful is happening in that moment in our own world. If we're in the middle of an actual situation where we need the fight or flight mode, then yes, that fight or flight mode is really helpful. It is a literal survival mechanism. It's a gift that we have that, right? And in the vast majority of situations, even if our body is still on alert, or, is seeing all these things happening around the world, or there's something happening in our own life that we're worried about, or whatever it is, even if our body wants to react and wants to be in that anxiety state or fight or flight mode, or, all of the above, most of the time, that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight mode, is not actually going to help in the long term. It's going to make it harder for us to think, to get that big picture. It's going to be physically really, really not good for us either, and just emotionally very difficult. So a huge part of what I am asked to do by the spirit world is to be a presence of helping each of us in our own ways to find ways to come back into center, to feel held, to feel safe, to feel whatever it is we need to feel in order to come back into that parasympathetic, relaxed state of being. Not because we don't care, not because we don't recognize that these tragedies are real, but because actually it's of service. One of the best ways we can be of service, because then when we come into that relaxed state of being, then suddenly our whole brain can come online. And actually, what I also talk about in that Consciousness in Bloom book is my goal is actually not even so much to have the whole brain come back online. I mean, yes, that. And actually, it's our whole being is needed to come back online. So that's a whole other topic that I talk about in Consciousness in Bloom. But actually, in the interviews that I did with Anne Baring, I think we talk a good amount about this in those interviews. If you haven't seen those interviews, they're really powerful, really beautiful. Anne is, if you don't know who she is, she's 91 years old. She's, world-renowned scholar on really powerful things regarding the reemergence of the divine feminine, etc. And she's, one of her biggest passions right now is her anti-war work. So so I talk about this with Anne, but I also just feel this so passionately and powerfully in myself, is that we need new solutions on our planet. Really. We do, right? I think probably we all agree. And if we're in fight or flight mode, first of all, what's going to be online is that fight or flight part of ourselves, which wants to fight, wants to flee, wants to freeze, and wants to fawn. One of the above, or multiple. None of those are probably particularly helpful in terms of healing for our whole world. What our world needs is for our whole brain to come online, and our whole being, our whole full consciousness of all of who we are, ourselves as the brain, for sure, ourselves as heart, ourselves as soul, ourselves as spirit, ourselves as body, ourselves as earth, ourselves as cosmos, when we're able to have our whole being, we're able to relax and feel safe, held enough for even a moment to come into that whole being way of being, that full consciousness in bloom. Again, the title of that book. Yeah, then suddenly, then we can connect with everything. We can connect with the earth itself. We can connect with spirit guides. We can connect with our own soul. We can connect with our heart. What is our heart trying to say in this moment? We're scared. Often we can't even feel what our heart is feeling. We're just scared, and then everything else shuts off. But for those of us who, and many of you do, for those of us who have a relationship connection with the spirit world and with the earth and with all of the infinite dimensions of existence, I know for me, if I'm in a really scared state of being or anxious state of being, a lot of that shuts down, and it's much, much harder. Not always, actually, not always, but often it's much harder for me to open back up and feel and get these messages that come through me, and that suddenly, like when I channel, for example, things will come through that my human brain would never have thought of. I mean, maybe, but I don't know, maybe in 50 years it would have, but what? What was that? Right. And then I go, like, I channel, like I'm struggling with something, whatever it is. And I go into my praying, or I channel something, and all of a sudden the most obvious answer is right there. And my human brain could never, ever, ever have thought of it. I mean, again, I don't know, maybe, but it didn't. And then suddenly I go into this prayer state, or I channel, whatever it is, I connect with that, my whole way of being, my whole consciousness. And then boom, it's right here. It's so clear. And I feel like that's what I'm told also by the spirit world. That's what our world needs, right? From so many of us, like that's the point right now of us waking up. It's really just a matter of remembering who we actually are. But a key component in that waking up is on a very real, grounded, honest and not in denial way, long sentence, truly healing and holding the reality of ourselves as beings of this planet that are incredibly traumatized, right? Like, yeah, so it's a huge component of being able to come into that consciousness in bloom state of being, is being held and addressing the trauma, the real trauma of our world and of ourselves. Yeah, being of service to ourselves so we can be of service to the world, really. I mean, again, it's so cliche, we know these things. Put the oxygen mask on first, on yourself, et cetera, right? It's really true, really, really true. And something I talk about a lot, actually, I talked about this in a trauma-informed basics workshop I did last year. Again, speaking from firsthand experience, if we are attempting to be of service in a really traumatizing situation, which I did a lot, a whole heck of a lot for many years, a very real thing that happens is secondary trauma and compassion fatigue and burnout. Like our emotional system can actually just short circuit for real. And then we go numb, we start having PTSD symptoms. We can have, and we just become incapacitated. We cannot function. So then we're not able to be of service. In other words, if we give, and aren't taking care of our own nervous system and our own ability to be in that parasympathetic nervous system and come back to a state of our own sense of safety, our own sense of being held, our own sense of being okay on a basic level, even for a moment, we literally will not be able to help anybody. I've been there and I've done that. So I can just say it's true. And talk to pretty much any nurse or doctor or anybody in an ER, or talk to pretty much any social worker, talk to most therapists, talk to, lots of you are these people and know this firsthand. It is a real thing. So, yeah, I think that's everything I feel called to say with that. Yeah, and absolutely, yes, we are each in our own ways. This is the other thing I think I want to say is we each in our own ways are doing our piece, our puzzle. We're each a puzzle piece. That's what it is. That's what Spirit World says also. We each are a puzzle piece of what it is, we're here to be doing on this planet, to be being of service. And each one of us is different and unique. And from moment to moment, we're each different and unique. So, for example, me as a social worker, that was a period of my life where that was my role. Was absolutely, I was needed. I was supposed to be in that role. And there were some miracles that occurred in that world, and a lot of tragedies that occurred too. But absolutely, I feel like I was definitely of service in that way for a long time. And now that's not my role anymore. This is my role, right? So there's no right and there's no wrong. It just is. And from moment to moment, it might be different for each of us. So, okay. I think that's everything for right now. Yeah. Oh, one more thing. Very important. Yes. So, and this eclipse season we happen to be in, this is October of 2023 when I'm recording this. This applies a lot of the time, but I just want to name that the astrology right now is, I've been making a lot of videos about the beauty and the potential of healing in this eclipse time, which is absolutely true. And I feel it happening in myself, and I see it happening in a lot of you. And I want to name, without a doubt, so many of the energies right now are potentially very difficult. So I've talked about it in previous videos, but Mars was just squaring Pluto, and it was on the south node of the moon. Okay, so Mars was on the south node of the moon in Libra, squared Pluto, and then it just entered Scorpio. And in the second eclipse of this season, Mars will be relatively close to the sun, again in Scorpio. We have Pluto just went direct just a few days ago in Capricorn, and Pluto's squaring the nodes of the moon. I mean, on and on. There's a lot going on that absolutely, when we see these tragedies kind of extra in our face on the planet, yes. Yes, the astrology would just say yes. Yeah, unfortunately, yes. So I want to acknowledge that is there, and that's true. And part of what I feel like my role is then to say yes. And here's how the spirit world is guiding me to be of service to help you potentially navigate this in a way that's really actually healing and doesn't go down the road, of the more difficult potentials here. So yeah, if that resonates, great. And if it doesn't, that's totally great too. And speaking of that, actually last night, Chris Skidmore and I held the first part of our eclipse, our eclipse gathering, portal gathering. What's the word? Holding space. We're holding a 2-week eclipse circle together. And last night we had the first of the 2 gatherings, and then in 2 weeks on the second eclipse, we're having the second gathering. And during this whole time, this whole 2-week period, and really I would say even beyond, we're holding space. We're both astrologers, we're both we have what we were, at least I'm not anymore, but I was a psychotherapist, and we're both astrologers. And so we're holding this entire space as though we're really doing a craniosacral session with all of us, all of you who are involved, and with the cosmos. So I say more about that in a video I did the other day about the cosmos as a medicinal being. And that's part of the potential I feel here, is that on the ultimate level, the cosmos itself its natural state of being is radical balance and harmony. That's just true. It's a scientifically true thing, right? There are certain rhythms of the cosmos, of life, and it all wants to come to homeostasis. So the cosmos is always has the potential to be holding us in a way that we can come back into our own innate, natural, radical balance and harmony in ourselves, on a cellular level, on an emotional level, on a soul level, on a spiritual level, all of the above. And so Chris and I recognize that both. And last night was incredibly profound, to say the least. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever experienced something that powerful in that way. So we're continuing to hold that space. And if you want to join, you are absolutely welcome. I'm actually going to be recording, after I record this, I'm going to be recording a video for everybody involved in that eclipse circle, to be continuing the process that we started last night, over this 2 weeks, and then again beyond. And I'm going to be creating some journal, like a journal that can be printed or used on the computer, again, to hold the space of the healing potential in this time, specifically regarding our relationship to our inner feminine and inner masculine, which for a lot of us, the thought of healing that is like, wow, truly life-changing on so many levels. So, and that's part of the potential of these eclipses, really, really powerful, beautiful healing in ourselves in that way. Yeah, so if you want to join us, that the first gathering is recorded and it's up and available immediately, and we'll be having that second gathering on October 28th/October 29th, depending on where you are in the world. And that will also be recorded and all available indefinitely. And there's a really beautiful, beautiful community of people doing this together with us. You're very welcome to join if that calls to you. Okay, I think that's really all for right this minute. Yeah, and actually the very, very last thing I feel called to say, when I go into prayer, what I get shown actually is like when I feel it, like right this minute, I'm feeling into, okay, do I want to do a prayer for Israel and Gaza? I mean, my human brain is yes, of course. And what I get shown actually is the whole time-space continuum and these powerful, massive beings, which many of us, I think, are these beings, just holding space for the entire time-space continuum, which includes, Gaza and Israel. It includes Ukraine and Russia. It includes obviously this whole globe, the whole earth, every single being of this earth, and everything in the entire time-space continuum. So that's me personally. That's what I am guided to do, is to be holding space for everything, which includes everything. And if that feels good or comforting to you in any way, then here we are. I'll just sit and do this with you for a minute. Yeah, and you might feel guided to be one of these massive, powerful beings holding this space. I feel it as, if you know what Cheroklo energy is, I feel it as very much Cheroklo energy. So you might feel called to be one of these massive, powerful, healing beings in any given moment, in this moment. And you might feel called to just rest and be held by this energy of these massive, powerful, healing beings holding space for literally everything and anything. And that obviously includes you. And what I also feel in my prayers every day when I'm in this place, in this state of being, is outside of that whole the time-space continuum is shown to me like a chrysalis or a womb. And then outside of the time-space continuum is the void of the nothing and the everything. So what I'm getting shown right now, and what I get shown basically every day in my praying, is all the energies that are ready to transmute and leave and go back to source in the whole time-space continuum. All the energies that are essentially out of balance, I just feel them as we're holding the space. I feel all of those energies leaving the time-space continuum and being released back into the void, and really back to source, right? And back to the light. So it's like allowing extra hot air, in a sense, to exit anything and everything that's not needed out of that whole time-space continuum, which can include you, your own body, your own spirit, anything going on in your system that's ready to leave can also exit that time-space continuum chrysalis and just be welcomed back into the light, into the source. So you can be present here in your body on planet Earth, and you can just let go of anything and everything that's not needed here and now. And so it is. Amen. All right. And if you want more of that, come to any of my gatherings, pretty much. We do a lot of those kind of prayers together, and holding space, and yeah. And I've, anyway, so many resources, free, paid, all of the above, on my website. Yeah, you can, if you have any questions, just email me, livingtheonelight@gmail.com. My website is livingtheonelight.com. Yeah, so much. Wonderful. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being one of these puzzle pieces that the world absolutely needs so much. Okay. Sending you big hugs. See you soon.